Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest painters of Renaissance. He created innovative compositions and experimented with methods of representing space and three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface. The result of his inexhaustible curiosity is many unfinished projects, but also some of the most lifelike, complex, and tender representations of human nature. His experiments influenced the art of his successors and often became the standard of representation in subsequent centuries. Following are the 10 famous paintings of Leonardo da Vinci, and the world's most famous art, the Mona Lisa, draws thousands of visitors each day, many of whom are compelled by the mysterious gaze and enigmatic smile. The seemingly ordinary portrait of a young woman dressed modestly in a thin veil, somber colors, and no jewelry might also confound its viewers, who may wonder what all the fuss is about. The painting's simplicity belies Leonardo's talent for realism. The subject's softly modeled face shows his skillful handling of an artistic technique that uses subtle gradations of light and shadow rather than line to model form. The delicately painted veil, the finely wrought stresses, and the careful rendering of folded fabric reveal Leonardo's tireless patience in recreating his studied observations. Moreover, the sitter's perplexing expressions only adds to her realism. Her smile might be engaging or it might be mocking. It is there said that she is a complex figure and we are not able to judge her feelings. Last Supper, one of the most famous paintings in the world, Last Supper, was commissioned by Duke of Milan and Leonardo's patron during his first stay in the city. For the Dominican monastery of Santa Maria, depicting a sequential narrative, Leonardo illustrates several closely connected moments in the Gospels, including Matthew, in which Jesus declares that one of the apostles will betray him in and then institutes the Eucharist. Leonardo, who was intrigued by the manner in which a man's character can reveal itself in posture, expression, and gesture, depicted each disciple's unique reaction and declaration, intertwined as they appear to whisper, yell, grieve, debate around Jesus. Of Leonardo's experimental painting technique, in which he used tempers ground, the work began to disintegrate soon after he finished it. Viewers' complex study of varied human emotion revealed in the deceptive simple composition. Leonardo's pen and ink drawing, Vitruvian Man, comes from one of the many notebooks that he kept on hand during his mature years. It is accompanied by notes written in mirror script on the ideal human proportions that the Roman architect Vitruvius laid out in a book on architecture from the 1st century BC. The drawing illustrates Vitruvian's theory that the ideal human could fit within a circle and a square, two irreconcilable shapes. Leonardo resolved the concept by drawing a male figure in two superimposed positions, one with his arms outstretched to fit in a square, and another with his legs and arms spread in a circle. The work shows not only Leonardo's effort to understand significant text, but also his desire to expand on them. He was not the first to illustrate the Vitruvian's concepts, but his drawing later became the most iconic, partly because its combination of mathematics, philosophy, and art seemed a fitting symbol of Renaissance. The drawing is now housed in the Gallery Venice, where it is not typically on display but kept in climate controlled archive. Leonardo's portrait, long regarded as a self portrait, the red chalk drawing of an old man with long wavy hair and a beard, has been reproduced to such an extent that it defines how most people think of Leonardo's appearance. Yet scholars argue that the figure, with its craggy features, furrowed brow, and downcast eyes, appears much older than the age of Leonardo. Leonardo died at the age 67. They propose that the drawing may be one of his grotesque drawings, sketches he habitually made in his notebooks of people with eccentric features. Whomever the portrait represents, it is a departure from Leonardo's often captivating subjects, yet he managed to imbue the figure with nobility and wisdom of a mature age. And the next is the Virgin of the Rocks, which depicts the Holy Family meets Saint John the Baptist as they flee to Egypt from Herod's massacre of the innocents. Leonardo was involved in the years of litigation with the Confrontation of the Immaculate Conception, which commissioned the work, and the dispute eventually led Leonardo to paint another version of the subject about 1508, which is now housed in the National Gallery of London. The first painting shows the ways in which Leonardo ushered in the High Renaissance. Early paintings from this period often depicted figures in linear arrangements, separate from one another, and stiff in form. In the Virgin of the Rocks, however, the figures of the Virgin Mary, the Christ child, the infant John, and an archangel are arranged in a pyramidal composition, and they not only convincingly occupy a space but interact with one another through gestures and glances. A youthful Mary sits on the ground in a mysterious rock landscape, not on a throne as so many early Renaissance paintings depicted her. Her body has movement. It seems to sway as she tilts her head protectively toward the infant John, who kneels in prayer at the left, and she looks as if she nudges him over to the Christ child at the right. Jesus, in turn, blesses John as an archangel seen in a complex pose from the back, points towards John, and glances inscrutably. Next famous painting of Leonardo is The Head of a Woman. A small brush drawing with pigment depicts a young woman with her head tilted and her eyes downcast. Her posture recalls the Virgin Mary in Leonardo's The Virgin of the Rocks, suggesting that the drawing may have served as a model. The drawing's nickname, La Scapiglia, translates to disheveled and refers to the young woman's wayward strands of hair, the loosely stretched tendrils and shoulder contrast with the highly finished face, where Leonardo gently modeled the woman's delicate features from her heavy eyelids to her tender lips. It reveals Leonardo's fluid means of work, utilizing both expressive drawing to create form and controlled layer to provide detail. And the next famous art is The Lady with an Ermine. Many art historians identify the youthful woman in Lady with an Ermine as Cecilia Gallerani, the mistress of Leonardo's patron, Duke of Milan. The ermine was often used as an emblem for the Duke. The woman turns her head to the right, her bright eyes seemingly directed towards something outside the frame. Although the painting has been heavily overpainted, notably the dark background, it nonetheless reveals Leonardo's knowledge of anatomy and his ability to represent character in posture and expression. He captures the girl's youth and the genial nature in her guileless features, attentive gaze, and tender embrace of the ermine, which sits with its head cocked regally and alert. Her slender hand reveals the complicated bone structure beneath the skin, just as the head of the ermine suggests the skull underneath the finely rendered fur. The Salvator Mundi made headlines in 2017 when it sold for a record breaking 450.3 million at auction. The high price was all the more surprising when considering that Salvator Mundi was in poor condition. It had a questionable history, and its attribution was a subject of debate among scholars and critics. Many pundits remarked on the poor skill used to represent Jesus' face, the stiff posture, which was so unlike the Renaissance master's characteristic twisting poses, and the unconvincing representation of the glass globe, which, if solid, would have reflected a distorted view of its holder. An optical trick that Leonardo would have known about. Christie's, the auction house that managed the sale, dismissed the criticisms, noting that any lack of craft was the result of heavy restoration in previous centuries and pointed to the soft modeling of Jesus' right hand and the Phoenix of his curls, both characteristics that resemble Leonardo's technique. The auction house also asserted the conservation had confirmed that the painting was made of the same materials that Leonardo used was of an expensive, high quality, and virtuous. The portrait of Ginevra de Benci is the only painting of Leonardo publicly displayed in the Western Hemisphere. It is one of Leonardo's earliest works, finished when he was in his early 20s, and shows some of the unconventional methods he would use throughout his career. Inspired by his northern contemporaries, Leonardo broke with tradition by depicting the solemn young woman in a three-quarter pose rather than the customary profile, and thus he may have been the first Italian artist to paint such a composition. He continued to use the three-quarter view in all of his portraits, including the Mona Lisa, and it quickly became the standard for portraiture, so that the viewers take it for granted today. Leonardo may also have used his fingers when the paint was still tacky to model Ginevra's face as suggested by the fingerprints found in the paint surface. The Virgin and Child with Anne was Leonardo's last paintings, and in this work he used many of the conventions that he had established throughout his career to depict three generations of the Holy Family: Saint Anne, her daughter, the Virgin Mary, and the Christ child. Anne, at the apex of the pyramidal composition, watches Mary, who sits on her lap as the Virgin tenderly restrains the child from mounting a lamb, contrasting with the knowing infant Leonardo depicted in the Virgin of the Rocks. The Christ figure in the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne appears innocent, demonstrating playful juvenile behavior and showing a trusting expression as he returns his mother's gaze. The interaction between the figures feels intimate and reveals Leonardo's ability to represent convincing human relationships. The painting also shows Leonardo's lifelong interest in believingly representing three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. Finally, summing up, we cannot pick but accept that Leonardo painting stands one of the world's best painting because of his talents which are inbuilt in it. Thank you. Thank you for watching.